Well, as Tyrese Maxey continues to play at an MVP caliber level night in and night out, a lot of fans are wondering whether or not it makes sense to try to move on from some of the aging veterans and put more of a competitive team around him for the rest of his prime. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you by Bet365 and coming live to you from the Xfinity Lounge. I'm Derek, joined by Kyle. Devon has the day off.
A rare day off for our friend Devon.
Yes.
As the point person of this show.
It's not quite going to be as epic as Kyle's days off coming up here later in the week, but he does have 2 days off. You know, obviously the Sixers just finished up a stretch where they won 3 out of 4. Lost last night to the Lakers, 112-108 in a close game, which, surprise, surprise, was pretty much lost in the third quarter, even though they then tried to turn it around and played pretty competitively down the stretch. But, you know, Tyrese Maxey, another really strong game. Joel Embiid took a lot of shots, didn't exactly make a whole lot of them.
It was strong, all right. Strong and wrong, as Devon would say.
And when you have that kind of a performance right before we have a mailbag show and we solicit questions, a lot of people then come at us basically wondering whether or not it makes sense, whether it's feasible, whether it's realistic for the Sixers to trade either of their 2 stars. Like I said, because a lot of nights, either Paul George or Joel Embiid aren't in the lineup. Maxey's not getting a lot of help. We all understand that he's got a window where he is just entering his prime. You want as much help as possible. We'll probably dive into that pretty quickly here in the Mailbag Monday. Before that, though, you and I were at the arena. Didn't get a whole lot of chance to talk about the game because it's been a struggle to make some of the post-game shows. We'll just leave it at that. What were your overall thoughts on the way that one played out? And I guess specifically with the way Joel Embiid played.
So I was really conflicted live, and I feel like I was even more conflicted after the game, where I did think, to my eye, he moved a lot better.
Yes.
And there was more of a concerted effort around the rim, not just as a rim protector where he had a block on LeBron in the first half, but even as a rebounder. The stats weren't anything to write home about, but you and I both saw, especially when they were on defense on the baseline where you and I sit at the games, Derek, a lot of moments where even if Joel was not getting the ball himself on a defensive rebound, he's hitting someone with a box out or just making contact with someone, taking up space would be a good way to put it, so that they could team rebound better. And I think the Sixers have, 17 more shots than the Lakers
dominated
last
the glass.
night? They dominated the glass, and that's not, I'm not going to come close to saying that's all Joel Embiid. Andre Drummond had another great night as a rebounder once again. But as a team, when you consider they were up against a much bigger team that imposed their will offensively with their size, I think the fact that the Sixers created as many extra possessions as they did is a good sign for Joel and a good sign for the group. Now, the big thing last night was the lack of touch from Joel. And on paper, I think you would say the process was pretty good. He got good looks. He just missed a lot of shots. I think the thing that I worry about, and Derek, you were discussing this in Discord with some of our diehards today, and obviously if anyone wants to subscribe, go to allphly.com, look into our wonderful diehard program. I think one of the big things that leaps out at me, and one of the reasons I am concerned about poor shooting nights when they happen for Joel, teams are not afraid of him going downhill at them anymore. They are not afraid of him generating enough leverage as a driver, as a post-up player. And because of that, they're able to play him fairly tight, both in the mid-post and all the way out to the perimeter. So while he still is big enough and tall enough to get his shots up against almost anyone in the league, the window that he's shooting in is much smaller. And I think he has struggled with that over the last year plus or so. And I'm not sure that is coming back unless he's able to reclaim some of the physicality that he's shown. The one game that I think we all agreed that he was able to do so was against the Toronto Raptors team, who, while they're big and long on the wing and at the forward spots, was missing Jakob Poeltl, and they didn't have a true big to throw at him. So he was able to mismatch hunt and get some deep catches against 6'7", 6'8" players. And in those situations, you still are going to take your chances with Joel. But against the likes of Ayton and Jackson Hayes, guys are a little bit closer to his height and weight class. It's just a lot of crowding him around the mid post and around the elbows. Yeah. And his percentages as a mid-range shooter have gone down pretty drastically from when he was an MVP. And that's worrying to me because that's where he's going to have to make a lot of his money to continue to be a high-level offensive guy moving forward.
Yeah. Over the last 2 years, really since he's been playing with this injury, he's shooting about 41% on long mid-range jumpers. Before that, he was up about 48% during his MVP years. Some years, he eclipsed 50. He's definitely making fewer of them. It's a pretty small sample size because I don't know if you've noticed, he hasn't played a ton of basketball here over the last 2 years. So the shooting numbers, there just aren't that many jumpers. I do think the touch is there. They're probably going to be slightly more difficult until he learns how to create space with his limitations. In terms of last night specifically, honestly, it was probably one of his best, and I apologize for the pun here, but it was, in terms of process, it was one of his best process games of the season.
I said process during my rambling there, so it comes with the territory, I think. If
he makes a couple of those jumpers, I think defensively, he wasn't perfect defensively. And quite frankly, when you're playing against a Luka Doncic-led pick and roll, he would have struggled with that 5 years ago, even before the injuries. It's very tough for a big man to both protect the rim and also contest that shot. I thought he was moving and contesting as well as he has pretty much all year, which that's not saying is where it was before. It's not even necessarily saying it's where it needs to be for him to be an impact defender. It's just better than it was at the beginning of the season, which was really, really bad. I think he showed that he was a little more willing to, like I said, contest shots, rotate out. He was moving a little bit better. I was okay with that. I agree with you. He was pretty solid on the glass, especially, like I said, compared to what he was earlier in the season. And a lot of the shots, quite frankly, I just didn't mind. There was maybe that one, in a weird way, the turnaround when he had a mismatch
late in the game against Austin
but you
Reeves.
Were down 3. You had Paul George wide open in the corner.
Yeah.
I think you had Jared on the wing open for a 3 as well. That was maybe the one that I would take back. But for the most part, those were shots that he has historically made and shots that he had pretty good space on as well. He just couldn't buy anything. Nothing at the rim, nothing as a jumper. The whole team, like McCain, was missing bunnies at the rim. It was really, you don't have very many games where you have 17 more shots and more free throws made than the other team and still find a way to lose. And the way you do that is you miss everything easy. So I don't want to overreact too much to that. I would say in a very weird way, I was kind of encouraged by that game in a way that I haven't been very often by Joel this year, which again, I understand he shot 4 for 21. And if he has an even bad shooting night, they win that game easily.
Yeah. So, we'll see. His discussion that we were both privy to in the locker room after the game was about getting into a rhythm. And he talked about the plan, air quotes around the plan, so much as there is one right now, is that he gets 2 days off after games, eventually wants to cut that down to being able to play every other day. So while he still wouldn't be playing back-to-backs, he'd be available for more of these games that come in quick succession throughout the regular season. That would be ideal, not just for the team, so that they can figure out the push-pull with Maxey leading things now and how these young guys operate off of him. I do think one thing you saw last night, he made a big difference for the VJs and the McCains of the world, getting them some clean looks and drawing attention away from VJ and Jared, which is great for both of them. But I'm a lot more reluctant than most people, it seems, to buy into the rhythm argument.
How's he ever going to get into rhythm when he doesn't play?
Yeah, I don't know that he's ever going to play consistently enough to get the rhythm. And so I need the touch to just be there. It can't be this thing that's like, well, I haven't played enough games recently. Well, you haven't played enough games recently in 2 years. So they have to figure out a way to get the best out of him while also not defaulting to him in some of these big moments. Yep. I think one of the things that drove me crazy about the Reeves turnaround, other than you're taking a turnaround over Austin Reeves instead of throwing him through the stanchion, essentially, is that those possessions in the final 90 seconds, 2 minutes of the game are possessions I frankly would have just rather run through Maxey or somebody else. Not to say Maxey was all that good in crunch time last night, but I think if the idea is turn the keys over then. Don't just default to give it to the big guy and let him cook for 18 seconds in the middle of the floor. That's what I don't want to see.
Yep. All right. Why don't we get into the mailbag questions? Because I know we got a couple of them that very directly relate into this topic of conversation. So, Bree, if you can pull up the first one here.
So we got a few of the same question, as Derek alluded to. These are from a couple of our followers on Blue Sky. Is it possible or probable to get out of either PG's contract or Joel's? And we got another question. Any realistic trades are PG and or Embiid impossible to move?
So I think Joel is just impossible to move.
I don't think he's gone anywhere.
Yeah, and if you could move him, it would require all of your draft capital, at least all of your high value draft capital. Like the argument for moving Joel is you need to clear the books so you can try to build around Maxey and have a deep team around Maxey and get, more, we have another question about this coming up, more consistent, reliable scorers who are maybe in Maxey's timeline.
Yeah.
Well, if you trade Joel Embiid, the assets that you're going to have to use to trade him are assets that now you're not going to have any of to try to go out there and get Tyrese Maxey a running mate. I think Embiid would be, like, we can talk about whether or not, like, it would be beneficial if they move Embiid. Doesn't really matter. I just think the cost is going to be so prohibitive that, yeah, you might gain some financial flexibility doing so, but you're going to lose all of the trade flexibility because you have nothing left to try to go out there and pursue guys with. So I think Embiid, it's just, he's got too many years left. He's too much for uncertainty. Like, here's the way I'll phrase this. All right. I think theoretically, if you're talking about building around an aging Embiid and then how you can have an aging Embiid try to help you, Tyrese Maxey is almost like the exact archetype of a star that you would want. He's still, like, Embiid's gravity on the perimeter is still valuable to a player like Maxey in ways that it wouldn't be as valuable to other archetypes. And Maxey and him have so much chemistry, and you even see that sprinkled in every now and then throughout the year, even with Embiid playing so infrequently. So if he is so unreliable and has taken such a step back defensively and is owed so much money that it doesn't make sense for him on the Sixers, how are you going to find a team that isn't going to ask for everything you have to take on that contract? I just don't think it's realistic with how much time he has left.
Just for perspective, Joel Embiid has the second highest cap hit in the entire league this season. Next season, that comes down to 6. He's going to be making $58.1 million next year, and he's only behind Steph Curry, Jokic, Giannis, Jason Tatum, and Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is the name that jumps out there as the guy who's like, he's probably not worth being the tied for third most paid player in the league next season.
He's an Iron Man compared to Joel Embiid, though.
But yes, and for reference, next year, Paul George will be 11th. But I do think you're right that Joel Embiid right now is a much more difficult player to move. He's got more years on the contract. He's making more money. I think he's been more unreliable and frankly just not very good this year. While at least from Paul George, there is an idea that you could fit him into a team rather than he's got to be the center of everything with Joel Embiid. I think the only way that you're trading Joel, other than attaching a bunch of stuff to get rid of him, at which point to me it's cost prohibitive, is if you just find one guy like Joe Dumars in New Orleans who's like, I'm willing to take the risk. We clearly have seen Dumars and Troy Weaver down there already willing to go out on a limb and say Derek Queen is our guy and go out on a limb for him. Maybe they'd be willing to chase another big. Weaver specifically has been someone that he really loads up on front court pieces. That was part of the reason he ended up losing his job in Detroit, is made some good draft picks and then just kept adding centers and power forwards to a team that needed wing help and needed more guard play before they were able to eventually put Ivy and Cade Cunningham on the floor together. So, yeah, I think Sixers fans, in Joel's case, are going to just have to accept that he is definitely here for at least the next couple years. The other thing that's come up recently, Derek, and Mike O'Connor wrote about this for the Ricky the other day, the idea of a wave and stretch. This was discussed in our Discord as well. There is no legal way to waive and stretch Joel Embiid until at least 2027 because he has so much money owed to him over the course of this extension that it would exceed the 15% threshold that you're able to be at for dead money on your books.
And start calling you calc.
Sometimes I look at the CBA and all the related readings to it. So right now, if you care about this team, if you want them to succeed, even if you have been a Joel skeptic, Joel hater, trade Joel for Josh Giddey in the case of one of the viewers today in the show chat who has not been a Joel fan, you need to just hope that he gets better with time. You need to hope that that rhythm thing is real. You need to hope that the plan that they have him on in terms of every other day eventually will get him to a spot where he's good enough to contribute to consistent winning for this team. Hopefully that happens in the playoffs, because right now he's your problem, is how I would put it. There's either you're going to win with him and he looks better, or you're going to lose with him and he's going to look how he has for the last year plus, which is an inconsistent, not as good version of himself.
He's got 3 more years after this one, man.
Yes,
There's too much money left. Yeah. All right. I agree 100%. Paul George is interesting.
Yeah.
Because he's played what, like 8 of the last 11 games. One of the games he missed was an ankle sprain. That's not, I mean, you're always worried about ankle sprains, but that's not the part of Paul George's body that we're really focused on right now. Yeah. That's not the one that's been problematic. He's been playing, I think, pretty good basketball. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Paul George is willing and able to, slide back into a more complimentary role. That was part of the reason why I was, intrigued in signing him as a free agent. You hope you got 2-star years out of him at the beginning of the contract, and then he would slowly drift into being a 3rd or 4th option. He had the skill set and the mindset to do that. Unfortunately, you didn't get 2-star years out of him. Not sure it really would have mattered with the compromised Joel Embiid anyway, but he has not, he's in role player Paul George in year 2 when you're hoping it was year 4 of the contract. Whatever. I think he can still be helpful even as he ages. And I do think like he is such a, well-rounded player, such a two-way player, that he is like, remember, he's got 2 more years after this one. So at this point next year, he will be, I think, a pretty significant trade asset. And if he plays like the next couple of months as a pretty good contributor, maybe not 22 point per game Paul George, but 16 to 18 point per game, playing 2/3 of the games from here on out, I think once you get to the offseason, he's at least a neutral trade asset. So if you combine the fact that he plays a little more regularly for the rest of the season, along with the fact that he only had now after this year will have 2 years left on the contract, along with the fact that after this year, because you owe OKC that pick, top 4 protected pick for the Al Horford trade, after this year you will have an extra draft pick to trade. You'll have 4 draft picks to trade. I think it makes the most sense to really investigate trading Paul George next year, whether that's in the summer, season going on, towards a trade deadline. I just think you're going to have more flexibility and more options if you use this year as a chance to rehabilitate his value, gain that extra draft pick, lose a year on the contract. I think it'll be a lot easier to pursue something then.
Yeah, it's just easier to imagine a world where he can be a winning player somewhere. Now, albeit he's going to be making probably way too much money to be that winning player, and whatever the role would be, not going to be worth the contract, but that's a different conversation. I think with a pretty good year under his belt this year, and then there's only 2 years left, it becomes a lot more viable. But at the same time, I've been pretty happy with what Paul George has brought to 100%. The Sixers. Defensively, I think he's made a massive difference. Need the offense to be more consistent, and frankly, I would have liked to see him spend a little bit more time on LeBron James at the end of that game last night as they were cooking Quentin Grimes, or he was cooking Quentin Grimes, I should say. That's not really any disrespect to Quentin. LeBron
no, he just shot over him.
All-time great, and he shot over him. Just wish we could have gotten one last PG LeBron James battle, albeit in Lakers and Sixers jersey. So, yeah, I think in the short to medium term, Paul is an easier guy to move. But I think the broader context or the subtext is they're not going anywhere right now. There's no real way to do so without having to pay a premium. And I think if your focus is on Maxey and Edgecombe and McCain and building into the future, you want to keep those future picks, the Clippers picks included, so that as they age, and VJ's 24, 25 years old, Maxey's 28, 29, 30 years old, that you have more reinforcements coming in behind them rather than some guys who are on their way out of the league.
Yeah, look, I get where a lot of this sentiment comes from. I don't think, there's obviously a lot of frustration with Joel Embiid. I don't think I'm necessarily frustrated with him as more as I'm just sad that this is the state of his body and his career. But you have to acknowledge at where you are. You can sit here and hope that he miraculously turns around. He actually spoke a little bit after the game that hopefully, as we go into the season, he can, because right now they want him 2 days off after every game before he plays another one. He's hopeful that at some point he can get to only needing 1 day off and play more regularly and get back in a rhythm. I'm willing to see that play out. But if I'm going to say that I'm hopeful that he's going to all of a sudden revert back into being a dominant player, that would be unrealistic. So if you're sitting here saying like they like I need to turn the page so they can build around Maxey properly, I get where that sentiment is coming from. I just think Maxey, you know, he's still only 25 years old. He's got a lot of runway in front of him. He's really just entering his prime. In fact, he's improving every year still. And I don't necessarily, he doesn't have the injury history where you think like you're running on borrowed time. Like you've got time, not that you want to waste his prime, but you have enough time, I think, to be patient. Yeah. And, you know, that means first of all, that means trading Joel Embiid just going to rip you of all your assets. It just doesn't make sense. But with Paul George, I do think that means, all right, give him the rest of the season to rehabilitate his trade value. Let him improve his trade value just by the sheer fact that you're going to have 1 year less on his contract. You don't have to try to jumpstart any kind of a, you know, fire sale. You can wait until you have a little more leverage to get what you truly need to build around Maxey. Because look, they are, for a team that is obviously older and has some dead weight on their salary, or at least salary that's not contributing night in and night out, it's not like they have no optionality for the future. Like they've got 3 young guards who are very, very valuable. They've got, they would have a 4th guard who's playing decent, if not frustrating at times.
We got a segment coming up on who I think you're talking about.
And they've got 4 draft picks in the future once this clock rolls over that they can trade, including 2 of them that have at least a chance of being decently high value. Like the fact that they have done so well in the draft and that they were able to recoup some of those Clippers draft picks, they're not completely boxed in. I just think trying to make sure you trade anyone now puts you in a spot where you can make a mistake.
Yep. So short version, TLDR is they ain't trading these guys. Not this year. I would be stunned. Yep. If there's even an offer out there, let alone the motivation on both sides to get it done.
Yep.
So we will move on to another important mailbag topic after we talk with our friends.
Guys, you ever head on over to a friend's house, ready to watch a big game, and you get there and their setup is a total mess? Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to anyone on this set because we all take great care of our home setup. But every now and then you get there, it's lagging, it's buffering, and you're switching between apps trying to find the game. See, they claim that they were a big fan, but you feel like you've been tricked. But if you call yourself a basketball fan, you have to have Xfinity. It's the ultimate sports destination where you can find the best games and your favorite teams all in one place. The way that you watch is next level. Next level. Got all the action right in your living room. Plus, Xfinity's best picture and sound with enhanced 4K is so clear it feels like you're in the arena. On top of that, you get real-time notifications and live stats right on my TV. It's the best seat in the house every time. Next game day, make sure that big fan isn't a big fail. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. Restrictions apply. Multi-view requires Xfinity 4K capable TV box.
Guys, we've all been there before. You come out of Christmas, you're like, you know, next year, I'm not going to leave things to the last minute. I'm not going to give somebody a gift card. I'm going to be thoughtful. I'm going to choose gifts throughout the year. And here we are in December. You did it again. You left it to the last minute. You don't know what you're going to do. That's where our friends at Aura Frames come in. You give the gift of memories. You give the gift of things that can last forever. Aura Frames is awesome. It's recommended by Wirecutter, the #1 recommendation from those guys. It's been recommended by Oprah several different times. You know Oprah is basically never wrong with her recommendations. If you don't trust me, you got to trust them. Here are the great features, guys. Unlimited free photos and video. You download the Aura app, connect to Wi-Fi, get them in there. You can personalize the gift, preload photos before it ships. Aura Frames is the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com. $35 off of Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames using the promo code PHLY at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code PHLY.
All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you by Bet365. You know, obviously that first block was, I think, maybe a little bit, I don't want to say jarring, but like there's some people who are like, yes, trade them now. And other people are like, are we really talking about this? Look, it's something that a lot of people have been talking about. So we got to address it. And whenever something like that comes up, I'm not going to ignore it. I just want to address it in like kind of the most logical, rational, non-emotional way and try to lay out all the facts. So I think that was important to bring up there. Now let's move on to someone who I think we have a little bit of hope for in the future. In fact, we want to make sure, you know, we talk to you now about
the future being bright.
Because the future is hopefully bright.
Thank you to Shady Rays, the wonderful polarized shades.
Let's go right into our mailbag question related to Jared McCain.
Why aren't the Sixers playing Jared McCain more?
It's a very
Asked
good
by
question.
Scooby.
It's a very good question, Scooby. It was so on the one hand.
Fun fact, that's actually one of my many nicknames from my friends, and I have no idea where it came from.
Okay.
It materialized out of thin air. So that was deep high school lore on me.
So obviously,
I promise that was not my burner account, just to be clear.
Obviously, Jared had a great start to last year. Incredible stretch of 15 or so games during the 22 that he played. Came back, struggled, and then I thought really started to turn it around. He ended up averaging, basically 14 points and shooting 44% from three-point range over a 5-game stretch. Since then, has not gotten a ton of time, with the low light being last night's 13 minutes against the Lakers. Even though he came out and he was real strong there in that first half, I think it was something like 8 points on 5 shots in 9 minutes.
Hit a beautiful pull-up 3 out of a ball screen.
In the first half, he then sat on the bench the entire third quarter as the Lakers were sitting there in zone and the Sixers couldn't bat a shot to save his life. Came out, got like maybe a 5-minute stint in the fourth quarter, struggled with a couple of layups, and was out for the rest of the night. After the game, Nick Nurse, basically said, that's a really big team on the perimeter, which I don't disagree with. That's a tough matchup for Jared, but it was, given how much you're struggling offensively in that third quarter and how much success he had, at least on the offensive end, little surprised he didn't go back to him.
Yeah, the lack of minutes for him in the third quarter was baffling. And I get that Nurse said they're really big. And frankly, when you saw VJ Edgecombe trying to guard Luka Doncic in the post,
yeah,
if you would imagine Jared McCain in that spot, he's a little bit stronger, bigger, to hold up in the post. But Luka's going to shoot right over him the same way that he shot over VJ. So I can understand the logic. I just vehemently disagree with it. The whole problem you had the entire third quarter was you couldn't throw the ball in the ocean. Some of that is Joel Embiid. You're not subbing Jared McCain in for Joel Embiid, at least. I don't think Nick Nurse is crazy enough to do that. But I was baffled by his usage of him last night. I will say, of the panel members on this show and compared to people in the fan base, I was probably most skeptical of how they would use McCain this year, both because of the obvious injury stuff, but also the way they've talked about him and how I saw the VJ thing unfolding in the preseason where Nurse is ready to start him right away. Nurse is playing him 30 whatever minutes. Grimes is going to soak up a lot of minutes and touches. He's more of a deliverable two-way guy right now. So I saw a little bit of this, but even I, on that island, have been shocked at when you have moments where you need shooting on the floor. Jared has not been all that consistent as a shooter quite yet, but he is still by far one of the most reliable or proven shooters that they have on the roster. And I just don't really get why Nurse has been reluctant about playing him, because if it's about size and reliability on defense, while Justin Edwards has had some defensive moments this year, by and large, he's been a train wreck at times. And you've given him a decent amount of run this year and allowed him to play through some struggles. And Justin, with all due respect to him, he is just not as important a member of the team as McCain is, as a lower priority developmental guy. He's been out of the rotation entirely. So I don't know if this is just Nick saying, I want the guys that I believe are going to help us defensively after the way they started the season. But you have to find a way to get McCain on the floor. And frankly, while I'm not in the McCain is your backup point guard spot, I think you need to use those minutes to allow him and VJ time on the ball, even if that means VJ having a bunch of turnovers like that game against Golden State. You have seen when Jared is able to play as a point of attack guy or initiate on a given possession in bench reps, he's looked pretty good. So he deserves opportunities in that spot as well.
And I would say, look, I think when Jared came back, he obviously wasn't moving the way he was. He had the big bulky brace, talked about it a lot, didn't have the burst. I don't think his burst is yet, I don't think he's getting to his spots as easily as he was last year, but I think he's getting closer. I think he's moving better and better and better as each game goes by. And, in terms of those, lineups when Maxey is off the floor, keep VJ out there, let him get some reps. But have him paired with McCain is what I would do. Let them play off of each other. Take turns running the offense, so to speak. Take turns on which matchup they want to attack rather than having VJ and Grimes out there. I think that's probably the adjustment I would make. And also, I would just let him play through some of this stuff. I understand he's getting destroyed defensively. And I actually think Jared is pretty good positionally defensively. I think he fights hard. I think he knows where to be. I think his rotations are sound. He just has a problem where bigger guys shoot over his T-Rex arms at times, and that's going to happen. You're not going to be able to just really scheme around that too much. But I think what he brings offensively is very, very valuable. I think I've always valued that. I think I believe in that. I think they need that, especially when Maxey's off the floor. And you just got to live with some punishment on that on the other end of the court. I hope, because before these last two games, he played 21 against Milwaukee, I think 22, and then didn't play much at all last night. Before then, he was playing a pretty consistent 26, 27 minutes per night. I hope this is just a blip, but I am worried as Paul George continues to play more and more and more, as you hopefully get Kelly Oubre, who I think is due for a reevaluation here later this week, as you hopefully get him back relatively soon. I'm a little worried about Jared's minutes going forward because it just seems like Nick doesn't trust him defensively.
Well, and it's notable that a lot of those bigger minute games are with VJ either out or on a minute restriction, and that his pool drastically shrunk the moment that Nurse was willing to say, hey, VJ, you're playing 30 plus minutes tonight. Yep. And so if you are a big McCain fan or someone who believes in him, that's something to keep an eye on, certainly. I would also say your point about the defensive stuff and that he makes the right reads, wants to compete, et cetera, et cetera. Part of it is if he makes the offense better, the better your offense is, generally the better your defense will be, because what happens when your offense struggles is that it's easier for teams to get you in early offense cross matches. So that's where you would, if it's VJ just gets stuck on a 6'9" forward because everyone's in scramble mode and transition, and hey, maybe that guy can post him up, or Maxey ends up on the wrong guy, or Paul George is in the weak side corner because he had to get the guy who's flaring out to the wing and providing the shooting spacing as someone is driving in transition. So if you score and you can get back in your set half court defense, that's where I feel good about Jared. Where you don't want Jared to be is, all right, he just ends up on the wrong person in early offense, and the other team's point guard, whoever it might be, recognizes that and just says, I'm throwing it to you, and I trust that you can take him down to the block or just leverage that, force help, force a late scram switch, whatever it might be, and the opening comes for a cutter, a shooter, or wherever else. I trust him to be where he should be within the scheme.
Yeah.
I don't trust him necessarily to defend guys who are 6 inches taller than him or he's given up weight to. But because he makes the offense better by being out there, I don't think he's going to end up in as many of those situations as it might seem. And it's why I find it hard to buy into they were just too big and we couldn't get him on the floor. They were killing you because they got to play in early offense for most of that quarter because your team couldn't score. The Lakers barely ever had to pull the ball out of the basket, and they could hunt every single mismatch that was there to be had.
Yeah. No, when you shoot 35% from the field, and I have no idea what they shot in the second or in the third quarter. I'm not Devon. I don't have that box up in front of me. I probably should. It was atrocious. Yeah. When you don't make any shots, it wasn't good. When you don't make any shots, your defense is going to suck. Yeah. It's just bottom line. I agree. 100%.
I think it's just a weird way to look at basketball, right? The part of the reason I enjoy basketball in the first place, there is nowhere to hide. You are playing. If you're on the floor, you got to play both sides of the ball, and teams have gotten better on defense about hiding problematic guys, but then offenses obviously respond, and they've gotten better at, hey, we're going to make sure we bring this ball screener here and generate the matchups they want to get. But the offense matters. How good your offense is and can be has a huge impact on how good your defense can be. And I just think everything we've seen from Jared is he's going to open up the floor. He's going to hit shots if you give him enough minutes. And I just can't believe they didn't give him any minutes in that third quarter as they sat in zone. I looked it up, Derek. The Sixers were 9 for 29 from the field in the third quarter. amazingly, they actually shot 44% from three, 4 for 9. I don't know how that's possible. VJ hit one, Tyrese hit one, PG, and Barlow hit one, and that was the shocker.
They were
of the night.
9 for 29 overall?
Yes. That means
and they were 4 for 9, so they were 5 for 20 inside the arc. Yeah, great.
Yikes.
Wonderful. No, and look, obviously, offense influences defense. That's not only making shots, it's also turnovers. One of the guys that you frequently replace McCain with in the lineup tends to turn the ball over every time he puts it on the deck. McCain doesn't usually have that kind of a problem. So I do think he should get a little more of a burn. I do continue to think that the future is bright for Jared McCain. I just hope we get to see more of it here in Philadelphia, and certainly more of it than we saw last night. So once again, that future is bright, brought to you by Shady Rays.
Should we talk about a couple more of our friends before we come back to another mailbag question?
We could do that. Whether it's a sore knee, stiff shoulder, or nagging back pain, Rothman Orthopedics is here to help you get back to the life you love. Their team of specialists treats all kinds of orthopedic issues, from everyday strains to long-term joint pain, with care that's efficient, effective, and close to home. Don't let pain keep you sidelined. Schedule an appointment today at rothmanortho.com/PHLY. Rothman Orthopedics, your mobility, our mission.
Guys, the World Cup is coming back to the United States for the first time since 1994. I was too young to appreciate that at that point. Even if I had gone to a game, I probably hardly remember it at this point. I want to take advantage of the fact there will be World Cup games in Philadelphia, and maybe you do too, right? Best place to go to get those tickets is on the Game Time app. Game Time is wonderful. It's got so many great features, like those panoramic seat views. If you're worried that you're going to be stuck behind a pillar somewhere, you're in an obstructed view, maybe it's just the wrong angle for a soccer game, football game, basketball game, whatever it might be, you can see before you're even in that app, or in that seat through the app where you're going to sit. You're going to get zone deals. So if you just want the best deal and you're willing to leave it up to chance, Game Time will select the seat for you, save you some money. You also get the lowest price guarantee. You get Game Time ticket coverage, so your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service in the ticketing industry. If you want to get ahead of it now, if you want to wait till closer to, it doesn't matter when you're buying tickets from Game Time. They got your back. So I want you guys to take the guesswork out of buying soccer tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today, and I will see you at Lincoln Financial Field next summer for the World Cup.
All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you, as always, by Bet365. You know, I think all of this, the obviously Embiid not being on the floor and available all that often, Paul George not being what he was a couple years ago, still good, still helpful in a lot of different ways, just not quite the same dynamic player that he previously was. Jared McCain maybe having some question marks he's got to get to overcome before he's able to be that big minute player. VJ Edgecombe being pretty early on here in his development curves. It leads to, I think, what was probably the big takeaway here from last night. And again, that big takeaway brought to you by Xfinity. I think we got a question related to all of this.
Veteran of the Psychic Wars, who contends that one thing holding the Sixers back is the lack of a reliable second scorer. Count on Maxey, but not anyone else. How many times already this season has Maxey had 30-plus points and no one else breaks 20? I'd have to look that up. Is this something that will take care of itself as players' health returns, or will this be a season-long problem? And ends with, it's hard to win with only one reliable scorer. Boy, is it.
Yeah.
What do you think, Derek? Is this something that I think we all assume, or assumed past tense coming into the year, that it would be Maxey and Joel 1-2, and that's kind of how you play and set up every night. But with Joel in and out of the lineup, it's a little bit harder for that rhythm to establish.
Yeah. No, look, and I think we brought this up, I feel like maybe during our 3 p.m. show last week. I feel like we talked about this topic not too long ago, where you don't know on a given night who's going to end up being that second scorer. I think a lot of times Joel Embiid is on a per minute production. He's a second scorer, but the efficiency has taken a huge hit.
Yeah.
But he's playing, 35% of the games, 40% of the games, whatever it is. Paul George is really helpful a lot, but I don't think every night, he's had a night here or there. It's not consistent. VJ, after the first 5 games, has not really been that kind of guy. Grimes will get hot shooting from the perimeter and then dribble it off of his foot. I don't think they have a prototypical second option right now. I think that is, if Joel Embiid actually does get into a rhythm, I think that becomes him.
Yeah.
Like, I think he can end up averaging 25 points on a reasonable efficiency. But we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about you don't know if he's ever going to play consistently enough to get into the kind of rhythm. And I think the rhythm is a reasonable explanation for why he's playing worse. You just don't know whether or not it's going to improve in a material way with the limitations of his knee. I still think at the end of the day, they will figure it out. Right now they are the 16th ranked defense and the 16th ranked offense. And if you're going to ask me which one has a chance of going into the top 10, I think offense has a better chance of improving and being maybe not a dominant force, but a above average to good force. I actually think if they stay healthy, they will figure that out. So I don't think I'm quite as concerned about not having a prototypical number 2 option, because I think they have so many different options, in 2 through 6 that can step up and be that on any given night, that I think defense is a bigger concern. Offense will figure it out. But I think it's definitely unorthodox.
Yeah, I think the hope is that eventually Joel settles in, and he looks like the guy we saw, or closer to the guy we saw against Toronto in the win before he had the several-week layoff, where he's able to get to his spots. He's able to hit some of those shots from around the elbows, but also just play off of Maxey, get some deep touches on switches, get to the free throw line and cobble it together. It's not going to be 30 points a game. I think that ship has basically sailed unless there is a dramatic improvement from him physically. But I think just the nature of how they play and how he plays, he will be the guy who gets the most touches outside of Maxey, and he will be the guy who's going to score the most outside of Maxey. Like you said, I don't think this is VJ's game or a fair expectation for him yet. Grimes is super volatile. Kelly Oubre had a great start to the year, but I don't think we could say you're going to rely on him for 17-ish a night, which is what he was providing at the beginning of the year. With Paul out, with Joel in and out of the lineup, just probably not something that's going to happen. So I think by default, it'll be Joel. I don't feel great about it for all the reasons we laid out at the beginning of the show. I wish I had more belief in him offensively and defensively, but offensively in this case. But I do think it'll happen. I hope that it really is just down to rhythm. I don't believe that is the case. I do think there are things that are holding him back that are down to physical and even a little bit of the mentality stuff, although I think he's in much better spirits this year. But yeah, it's a problem. And I think there's also a little of the way Nurse has set up the offense. It isn't really designed for it to be, hey, it's the Maxey show, and then we're going to run it through this specific guy when Maxey's on the bench. It is a democratized approach. It's pass, move. They want to get 3 and 4 guards on the floor and allow them to just attack off the dribble, swing the ball, and look for the opportunities that are there. They've had to get guys healthy. They've had to get everyone kind of up to speed. But I don't think in an ideal world they even really want to have another 20-point scorer as much as they'd love. Let's have 4 or 5 guys in that 15 to 20-point band, and then Maxey is the head of the snake on offense is kind of how I think that they view it.
Yep. No, I agree. Like I said, you hope some guys will grow into that, but the guy you're hoping that will grow into that, VJ, I think is probably a couple years away from doing that reliably. Like, he is on Maxey's timeline because he can step in and be a contributor now, not that he can step in and be a second or third option now. I think that's going to take quite a bit of development. The coach doesn't trust McCain defensively. That is going to be an issue. I think democratized is probably the right way to phrase it, which again, I think they can end up, if they play together consistently. Like, this was the second or third game that Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid have played together. Mm-hmm. I think they will get better. I think Embiid will get better as he plays more regularly, if he plays more regularly. The question is whether or not it's going to get to where it needs to be. But I still generally think, and I think we saw flashes of it. Like, last night was disappointing because they threw that game away in the third and weren't able to make a shot down the stretch. But I think in the first half, they played pretty good basketball. And certainly the process that led to them, I think they generated some really good shots. I think if they can play together, I think there will be periods of this season where we are optimistic. It's defensively, I have bigger concerns for sure. All right. And once again, that is the big takeaway brought to you by Xfinity. I think we have time for probably one more mailbag question before we get to our final friends. Yeah.
What do you got for us, Bree? Anything? All right. From Code Ran, how's the start of the season made you feel about the use of our long-term assets? Would you prefer the Sixers to stay aggressive in the trade market or start to think about drafting a team around Maxey and VJ? Or at the least, hold the assets for now. So basically, choose your own adventure, Derek. What are you doing this year to either move the needle for Maxey right away or hold on to stuff for the future?
No, I think this ties back a lot to what we opened the show with. I think that for the most part, this is an evaluation type of year and a rehabilitation type of year for a bunch of reasons. Like I said, I just don't think trading Joel Embiid is realistic. Even if you think that's the path, I don't think they can do that without mortgaging their future. And Paul George, I just fundamentally think he can have more trade value next year, or at least in the summer, going into next year than he would right now. I think this is mostly a hold the assets you have, let it play out, let someone like Paul rehabilitate a little bit, and then go from there. I think that frustrates a lot of people, but I do think, Maxey is... Look, I do think just using those draft picks, like the Clippers picks, to draft players to put alongside Maxey, that can be a little bit dicey because Maxey at one point is going to want to win. When you start talking about the Clippers 2027 pick, Maxey's going to be 27 years old. Really, rookies, even if they're a great pick, you're talking they're not high-level contributors into third or fourth year on that rookie scale contract.
They might be a good bench piece in year one, but they're not good enough to
by the time that player that we're talking about is ready to really contribute on a championship level course, Maxey's going to be like 30. That would be a little risky to let play out. You're probably looking at using those as draft picks, even if you're talking about a Maxey timeline, not obviously a Joel timeline. So I think, eventually you are going to look to be aggressive on the trade market. I'm just not sure right now is the time to do it.
Yeah. As much as the Eastern Conference appears to be open this year with various injuries and retools and some disappointments from teams that were supposed to be better than maybe they are right now, I still am very skeptical that any kind of all-in or win-now move is going to be the difference between this team competing for a title and this team being like a first, maybe second round exit type of team. And so in that case, I'd rather just hold on to the chips and say, wait for an opportunity. One of the things I would point out is right now, the guys who are on the open market, the guys who are at least being, I won't say shopped, but are talked about as potential trade guys are all guards, right? Yeah. It's Trae Young, it's Ja Morant. Those guys are not helping Tyrese Maxey win. They're further complicating problems that they already have with the guards they have on the roster. Now, are they better present day players than Jared McCain or VJ Edgecombe, Quentin Grimes? Yeah, but I don't think anyone believes that Ja Morant and Tyrese Maxey is like oh boy, that's a team that's about to contend with very little else around them. And so if you're going to use those picks not to draft players, but to trade them and get win now guys, I would be waiting until there's more of an opportunity for, hey, who's the wing version of these guys? Someone who just needs a change of scenery or is unhappy with their situation wherever they might be or has some downside risk with injuries. I would take my time and say, Maxey's still young enough that we don't have to push everything in. VJ has a long runway in front of him. Do not short circuit what probably is going to be a medium-term retool for this team. So unless there is a pie-in-the-sky situation that presents itself, in which case you always get on the phone, you always have the conversation, the market right now is not lining up for anything I'd be super interested in.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's take one more final break here to talk to some of our friends, and then we'll wrap up with a few more questions.
Guys, it is getting chilly out there. If your HVAC system stops working right now, be a lot of unhappy people, pets, guests, family, friends in your house visiting this winter, especially around Christmas, man. No one wants their house breaking down and to live amongst icicles during the winter months. You need Ace Hardware Home Services, trusted local pros who come right to your door, get your home ready for the colder months. You know what they say, when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So from heating tune-ups and plumbing fixes to generators and emergency repairs, their experts will handle it all. No guesswork, no stress, just a local pro who gets the job done right, satisfaction guaranteed. You're supporting local business. What is better than that? Find the help you need for your next home project at acehardwarehomeservices.com.
Guys, the Excite Center at Parks Casino is one of the many things I love about my casino of choice. Parks Casino is Pennsylvania's #1 casino and is so close to Philadelphia, located on Ben Salem. Take the Street Road exit off of 95 and the PA Turnpike. The Excite Center is the state-of-the-art entertainment venue located inside Parks Casino, named one of the best places to see country's best comedians and music headliners. Visit parkscasino.com to buy tickets for all shows, pregame the shows at their amazing beer garden, play some pop culture slots, roulettes, cards, and other table games you love while you wait. Parks Casino, this is how you win. Must be 21 and over. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show here on a pretty rare Mailbag Monday, in-season Mailbag Monday, as we are responding to all of your questions. I think we probably got time for a couple more before we start that roll call.
Do we have never mind. Breathe through up on the... All right, Justin D, TTP from our Discord says, apologies if this was asked before. Any all-time favorite sports books for each of you? Doesn't have to be basketball specific. One that always jumps out, and this is a very famous one, it's been talked about a lot, is Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam. That's one of the best. Honestly, it's one of the best books, period, I think I've read. It's not even so much about that Blazers basketball run as it was the personalities and the people connected to the team. I also read Pistol Pete bio that I am blanking on the exact name of it, but I read that on vacation one year, and he had a fairly, I think it might just be called Pistol. I thought that was a very good one. He had a pretty tortured life for a guy whose game was as artistic is the word I would use, and kind of free flowing. I think he would have been an absolute sensation in today's game, or even as like, you think of like how Steve Nash played and he got those 2 MVPs in the mid 2000s. Pistol Pete was doing a lot of that stuff several decades before. Now, never won anything, and there were all the accusations of this guy's a stat patter and whatnot, but I thought it was a really fascinating look at his upbringing and kind of the demons behind everything. So those are the two that I've read that I would highly recommend.
Yeah, it's probably have to think about this one a little bit more. In part because I do a bad job of reading books all the way through. I start them and then I don't finish them nearly as much as I should. I do remember
I didn't come here to play school. Shout out to Cardell Jones.
Yeah, I do remember I picked up a collection of Gary Smith's columns a couple years back. He had a book that basically collected the columns, and that one was really good just because he is one of the true greats at his craft and at feature writing. That's kind of the one that jumps to mind right away, but I would have to think back. Probably shout out some of our friends. Your own Weitzman, of course, go read his. Jake Fisher.
I have not read the latest Lakers book by your own, but I've heard
a lot of attention for that one.
Yes, he is. Well, Lakers on LeBron. That's a recipe for some success. So I don't end up reading a lot of sports books, I feel, in part because, and I'm this way with movies too, I feel like I'm so behind in like the canon of literature or whatever that I feel bad reading like a NBA biography that I got to catch up on. I only just read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein for the first time like 2 years ago. So I do feel like I got to catch up on some other stuff, but one day I'll get to the rest of the sports books. No,
and I probably don't read enough sports books, in part because we spend so much of our waking time thinking about sports that every now and then I just, if I'm going to sit down and read a book, it's probably going to unplug about something fiction. Good question, though. And I have to sit down. There's definitely a few more that will come to mind. But like I said, the Gary Smith collection was the one that came to mind right off the jump. All right, next question up, Bree, if we have it.
Which current Sixer would go the furthest / have the deepest run on Dancing with the Stars? Is a question from Sam. Thank you to Sam for the question. I think it's Jared McCain. Now, the meniscus injury, maybe that's...
I think he holds back because
maybe that's
of it.
taking his mobility. Maybe he's a little reluctant to go out there and really strut his stuff. But I just think Jared has the personality for it. I think I'm not saying the TikTok dances translate to Dancing with the Stars.
But he's comfortable with the movements.
Yes, yeah. He's very comfortable just kind of embracing that type of challenge, I would say. So I think he's where I would go first. I do think Maxey, if he took the time to, I don't know if he can or can't dance. I've never seen him, but I think he has the speed, the pace to get out there and really cut up a rug. So those would be my two.
No, we were talking, and this says something about us when we talk more about who would excel in Dancing with the Stars, but we don't pregame talk about books we've read. Probably says something about the people on this panel. But we talked about this a little bit before the show, and when Kyle brought up McCain, I'm like, yeah, that's right. But the one that I had outside of that was Maxey. And, especially if you go back to the dog show that he just did, he takes stuff like that pretty seriously, where like if he committed to it, he would try to win.
He wants to win.
Yes. And look, we haven't seen him dance. Don't know whether or not he's good at it, but he is something that I could see him throwing himself into it. So he was the one I brought up.
We do have a few shouts in the chat. Jack Reacher, for example, said Drummond. I think he has the personality for it. Absolutely. I
think it's tough when you're 6'11".
When you are as big as Andre Drummond, just finding the partner who's going to go all the way with you in Dancing with the Stars, I think that's a little trickier, but hey, you never know.
Bunch of people also bringing up Kelly.
Yes.
Yeah. I could see him enjoying that too, yeah.
We do have a super chat from James Alexander. Says, no teams want those contracts. I can only assume he's talking about Joel
So you
Embiid
listened to the first
Paul
half
George.
of the show.
Yes.
Yes.
So
we agree with you.
Thank you for the super chat, James. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that, like I said, that's the Sixers' problem to deal with until or unless they get better, more consistent play out of Joel and PG.
Yep. What do you think? One more? Or
Yeah,
do
we
we
probably got one or two more, even if we have to bleed into overtime a little bit. T-Zilla. Biggest surprises so far in the East this year or the NBA as a whole?
I think Miami would be my answer
They
for
definitely
the East.
Qualify. The Raptors have tailed off after the...
Even still, the Raptors...
They're still 15-10. So now Miami's also 14-10. So it says a lot. But the East is just jumbled up. I would also say, as good as I knew the Thunder were, I don't think I was expecting 23-1 with Jalen Williams missing a good amount of that 23-1 to start the year. They beat the Jazz by 30 points with Shea in street clothes in their last game. So it's not that I expected OKC to come back and just sleepwalk through the regular season. I am surprised that they have come back on what appears to be a mission to be like, yeah, we won that one already. And we are not getting complacent whatsoever. They have been absolutely destructive. I cannot believe how good they've been to start this year.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Like, you don't think the team that just won the title can be a surprise team, but, like, they are destroying people. Someone in the chat brought up Cleveland being only 14-11. I think that's fair. Like, we didn't say positive surprise. Like, surprise.
Yeah.
Cleveland is definitely underperforming what you expected. That's a team that only lost 18 games all of last year. For them to be barely above 500 qualifies. I think that is true. And it's not like Garland missed some time, obviously.
Yeah.
Outside of that, though, I feel like they've been relatively healthy.
Yeah, and Mobley, I think, has not leveled up to the extent that he needs to. The Lakers, I think, are another positive.
Yep.
People were split on them, so maybe not a huge surprise, but 17-6, they're like 10-3 on the road. They've been excellent. They're like 8-0 in clutch games this year, which you got Luka and LeBron and Austin Reeves playing this way. I suppose that's not too surprising, but yeah, the Warriors a little bit of a negative disappointment. Obviously, they're dealing with some injuries right now.
All right. What do you think?
Hit quick overtime, Bree. So everyone join us from our fast partners at allphly.com, where the conversation will continue. We probably get one.
Yeah.
We have one or two more.
I'm in
Bree,
no rush.
maybe.
I got no life.
All right. This is from Blue Sky. How much of a leash does Nurse get? I know people will cite injuries as a defense for everything, but the third quarter thing continues to be a disaster, and he's running Maxey at about 40 minutes a night. Are we allowed to entertain a replacement? You're allowed to entertain a replacement. Unless there is a lose the locker room scenario, I would be stunned if Daryl Morey and or Josh Harris made a move in the middle of this season.
Yes. No, again, entertaining question, of course. Are their seats hot? I guess that probably depends on how you mean that. Like Kyle said, an in-season change is like an act of desperation. And sitting here at 13-10, I don't think they're desperate. Now, will he survive if they either miss the playoffs or they make the play-in and lose in the play-in tournament, or maybe even lose in the first round? Will that prevent them from making a change? I think that's a fair question. Yeah. Because we've mentioned time and time again. I mean, we just said moving if your big two right now is unrealistic. You can change your coach. That's always a button that GMs and ownership likes to push if they think they can try to squeak a little more out of the core that they have. And especially with someone like Maxey and the way that he's playing, and 25 going on 26, like they are going to want to get the most out of what they have right now. But I do think you're until the offseason before you really have that conversation in earnest.
Yeah, 13-10 with Joel and PG missing most of the games, with Oubre injured, Watford injured, VJ missing some time, Jared missing time to open the year. There's really no animus in the organization for them to make a change. So there would need to be a sudden and dramatic negative shift. If they keep chugging along, playing above 500 ball, there's just there won't be an in-season change. To get to that point, there would need to be a major catalyst for it. Daryl has been very public about he does not let coaches go before 4 years. Derek always brings up that he did fire, was it McHale?
Yeah.
Like 10 games into the next season. So it's not like there's no precedent for an in-season firing. But in this example, I don't think we're there or we're close to there. So if you are anti-Nurse, and I know that's a growing contingent in the fan base, I think you're going to be waiting a bit at the very least.
I agree. And look, I think in-season coaching changes are just fundamentally tough to make work. Like if somebody comes in, they're probably going to run a lot of what Nick does, just because changing that on the fly when you have very little practice time is just something most coaches aren't looking to do.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think?
How about one more, Bree? Do we have any good ones left?
Putting Bree on the spot there. Jeez.
All right. Golden Pine. Sixers get a rare chance for some real in-season practice. What is the number one set/action/play you'd like the Sixers to try to install on offense?
I want to get Jared going off ball. I want to focus.
It's crazy that we thought the exact same thing. It's almost like we do 5 shows a week and see each other almost every single day.
That's true. But like I think that's part of what made this tough is that like I fundamentally believe in Jared McCain, the offensive player. Yeah. I believe in him running the point when Maxey's out. I believe in him running off ball, whether that's running off of Tyrese and running off of screens or coming off of DHOs with Joe. I want him to feel comfortable and to be a significant portion of this offense.
I think what I want them to work on more was the exact play we saw to open last night's game, which was Tyrese Maxey coming around. I think it was at least 2 cross screens around the baseline.
When VJ had the ball?
Yes, they ran him at point. They run Maxey up the ball. It's just a long loop. Set a couple of screens. You're bumping the defender off. He comes around. First shot of the game for him is a spot up 3. Bang, he makes it, gets off to a good start. I think you can certainly use other guys there. I think McCain would be great. I know I've also said for basically the entire time McCain has been on the team, let me see some elevator doors plays. We don't really see a lot of them just in general in the league at this point. I don't see them all that often, but would like to see some of that. But yeah, they're slowly integrating these guys into some very deliberate off-ball sets. I want to see them get better at them because I don't want Tyrese to have to live on what he can get off the dribble every night. He's an extremely talented scorer, can hit shots from all three levels, make the game a little bit easier for him.
Yep, 100%. I'm both glad and a little surprised that we were on the same page there, but that is where my head is at too.
All right. Is it time for, I won't call it world famous. That's Devon's job, but I think it's time for a roll call, Bree. How about that?
Don't sell yourself short, buddy. It's world famous.
Yeah, it's in this studio famous, I suppose. Thank you, everyone, for being here today on a Mailbag Monday. Good to see a lot of you. It's weird during the regular season, man. There are stretches of the year where you and I are just at the arena and off the show, and now we're right back in the saddle with no Devon to lead these horses to water. So thankfully, we got through one show without you, Devon. So shout out to Devon, who also
one more to go.
Devon was in the chat today, despite the fact that he had off. That's a team.
And I guess
player.
probably a good place to point out, we will be here tomorrow, 3 p.m.,
Yes.
Thursday, 3 p.m. We have Wednesday off, and then post games Friday and Sunday.
Yeah, I will only be here tomorrow. And then nice little vacation for me. So it's still wonderful to see all your names before I head out of town and drop off the face of the earth for a little bit. So thank you to Smy Guy. Thank you to Jack Reacher. Smoggy is right. Thank you to Jacob Manning, to Jorge, to Keith B. Thank you to James Alexander dropping a super chat in the show today. Thank you to Romeo. Where's Juliet out there?
That's not Jorge?
No. Wow. I see what you did there. Thank you to Mark Jackson, Doug Craig, X-Man, Philly Dell, Framed McRib is the winner of the best name in the chat today. Thank you to Val. Thank you to Jess. Thank you to my girl Nona. Thank you to Remo K.
What up, ladies?
Vader,
Well, not
SB
Remo,
Cole,
whatever.
Lawrence Talley, NJK, DPO. Headfa, I know, is stuck in a lot of meetings today,
Yes.
so we send our best out to Headfa, wherever you may be. Get through this Monday, get through the workday. Thank you to Yams. Thank you to Sheila Roten. I wonder if there's any relation to Tony Roten. But thank you to Sheila for stopping through. Marcus Blackstock, Eugene Ross, Vince
What's up, Gene?
Pellegrini, Lee Nguyen. Thank you to all of our wonderful people. I Gavini, Will, all our friends.
You knew when we wrote this headline, Vinny was going to be here.
Oh, yeah.
You
He had to chime in. So thank you to him for coming through. I will say, guys, get the likes up on this video. I would love to see some more thumbs up on this video as we hit the bricks for the day. I'm going to go home in my Eagles gear, get ready for Monday Night Football tonight, plan for tomorrow's show. Thank you to Brian Knight as well. I see you checking in right at the end of the show here. So hit the thumbs up button. It certainly helps us out in the algorithm. It more than you know, it helps Derek and me and
I would
Bree and Devon
sleep so much
sleep
better
at
if
night.
you hit that thumbs up,
The
please.
thumbs up button also is a thank you to super producer Bree, who's putting the graphics up on the screen. She's making the transitions between our partners and our ramblings. She does everything. You guys don't even know how much work Bree puts into this show. So hit the thumbs up button as a thank you to her. Also hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. How could I forget? Mom's grandchildren, what's up to Mom? Showing up for us. Thank you to Mom for being here. Phil
and
W.
Devon was in the chat too. The freaking
Phil W. as well, saying, hit the like button, everyone. Thank you so much, Phil, for stopping through. Charles Esquire says, go Bree at the end. Thank you, Charles, for saying thank you to Bree. Anyway, we are out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, 3 p.m. Until then, stay safe, take care of one another, and go Birds!
We all silly like the mayor.